What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato. Today, I want to talk to you about how we move forward now that we are unburdened by what has been. If you don't understand that quote, unburdened by what has been, I encourage you to type that into your search machine and you'll figure it out real quick. Nonetheless, if you've watched anything at any level at any time over the last month, then you understand. But now that we have elected a president, now that we found ourselves in a place where we generally know the path of which we are going, of course, we don't really know until we get there, but we generally know the path which we're going. And in my estimation, given all of the people that are lined up with this incoming government, we will find ourselves in a very strong place moving forward, in a very strong place. Now, the problem is, on the one hand, the 72 million people that voted for Donald Trump voted for him because they were ready for, I don't want to say something different because that's the thing that everyone keeps saying. Let's do something different. Let's change. But they're ready to not be burdened by high prices. They're ready to not be burdened by political correctness. They're ready to not be burdened by all this bullshit and nonsense that has been shoved on society over the last, I'll say 12 years, even though Donald Trump was president for 4 of them. Over the last 12, I'll say 16 years. So 8 years during Barack Obama. We had Donald Trump for 4 years and then 4 years for Joe Biden. For the last 16 years, shit has been just jammed down our throat. Political correctness and higher taxes and so on and so forth. So for a long time, minus 4 years of reprieve, we found ourselves in a place where we feel like we couldn't be us. We felt like we couldn't be the best that we could be. We felt like we had to, just kind of be ourselves. We were constantly getting all of our progress taken away from us. And essentially what was trying to happen is the government was trying to level the playing field. Or as Kamala Harris would put it, we all need to end up in the same place. We all need to end up in the same place. Some of us start a little further behind, so we all need to end up in the same place. Equal opportunity is not good enough. We want equal outcome. And the problem is equal outcome is not possible. If you've listened to any of the lessons of history that I've gone over the last couple of months since I started that series, then you understand equal opportunity is nearly impossible without a despotic government, without a government that is just ruling everybody, because the government decides equal outcome, not you. So it's just not possible. With that said, Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, said that the tendency for a democratic government is to move toward, quote, equality until it falls into socialism. Now, 2,500 years ago, he didn't call it socialism, but he did call it a democratic government because this has happened multiple times. It has happened multiple times. And the problem, or the reason that it happens, is because the society gets so comfortable. The society gets so spoiled. The society gets so complacent that it continues to elect these people that continue to give them more and more things, aka move them toward equality. And as that happens, then suddenly power shifts from the people to the government. And that's what has happened with democratic governments historically. That's what's happened. That's what was happening. And if you listen to Kamala Harris's speech whenever she finally admitted that she was beat, or if you read anything from Barack Obama or anybody else in that camp, to quote, maybe not a direct quote, we will continue to fight, aka we're going to continue to push this shit on everybody. We're going to be in the background, and in 4 years, we're going to be ready to come back and ramp things up. But there's a huge caveat here. There's a huge, gigantic caveat here. And that caveat is you. That's the caveat. It's going to be up for you to decide what happens next. Because, as I've mentioned, Aristotle, one of the smartest human beings to ever live, said that the tendency for a democratic government is to move toward more and more, quote, equality until it eventually falls into socialism or something of the like. And if that is the case, due to the society continuing to be complacent, continuing to move toward more comfort, continuing to move toward more laziness, lackadaisical, unhealthy, disease, so on and so forth, all of that which happened in ancient Athens, all of that which happened in ancient Rome, all of that happened over those periods of time. Now, different levels of disease and unhealth for sure, but all of that happened. The comfort and complacency that society and individuals in society fell into, which allowed for the overtake of the Roman Republic, is real. So, as I've said in the Lessons from History series, that one of the things, the main thing that we learn from history is that we don't learn from history, and we need to be able to learn. We have a moment, we have a time, we have a point in history where we get to choose. We, the people, get to choose what happens next. Now, many people, 72 million people, have decided to go in a direction of what we believe liberty looks like. With that being said, my feeling is 72 million people, maybe not all of them, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw everybody in a bucket. 72 million people believe that it's going to be they who save us. It's going to be them who save us. They're going to go, oh, finally, we got somebody in there that can go save us. Now, the truth of the matter is, how can you know? We can make plenty of assumptions. Donald Trump's been president before. We know what that looks like. We can assume that he's going to do a better job this time. Last time, he was a businessman that just happened to get elected president and didn't really know what he was doing. It's a completely different game than business. Business and politics are two different games. Politicians go into politics because they can't win in business, but they can win in politics. So he had to figure out how to play a different game. And he did that for 4 years. Now that he's had those 4 years, plus 4 years of, getting beat up and shot at and just dragged through the mud and still win an election, now he has 4 years to grow and prosper and help this society move in a positive growth expansion direction. But with that being said, the individual still has to decide what's going to happen. It is the culture of society that will dictate what happens 4 years from now. Over these 4 years, for sure, Donald Trump, RFK Jr., potentially Elon Musk, depending on how involved he actually is, Vivek, all of these people will do their damnedest, will do their best to adjust things in such a way that in 4 years, no matter what happens, we are at least moving in a more positive direction. We don't have these big oversights. We don't have these big agencies. We don't have all this nonsense. We don't have, hopefully, all this tax burden and so on and so forth. That gets improved. All of these things. But unless the individual decides to take responsibility, take their part of the responsibility, I don't want to say it's all going to be for nothing, but it's going to be much harder to keep it there. Because the Constitution of the United States of America starts with, we, the people of the United States of America. We, the people of the United States of America, which means that it is the consent of the people that it comes down to. It doesn't come down to a government. It doesn't come down to a regime. It doesn't come down to a group of people. It doesn't come down to anything like that. It comes down to we, the people. And we, the people of the United States of America, have decided to move in this direction. And now that we have decided to move toward a more expansive place of liberty, we, the people, have to decide to also do our part. To also do what it takes in order for not only the government to move us in a direction, because the problem is the government was not supposed to be a big, massive, overarching organization. It's not supposed to be that. If you go through and read the Constitution, the government was actually supposed to be a very small, very limited, very hands-off entity. And it was really up to the states to do most of the work. But as we know, that has not become the case. The government definitely, the federal government definitely has taken massive control of our lives and definitely dictates bigger parts of our lives than it was supposed to be, no doubt. My argument is that a big part of that is because society and individuals have become complacent. They have gotten so comfortable. We have gotten so lazy. We have gotten so lackadaisical. We have just allowed ourselves to fall into this trap of complacency that we've allowed this takeover. We've allowed it to happen. So individuals in society has a responsibility to do their part as well. This is not a one-sided trajectory. This is not, now that a different group is in there, now they're going to go fix everything. No, it's not just them. It has to also be us. It has to also be we. It has to also be I, me. I have to do something. You have to do something. Society has to do something. Otherwise, a lot of it's going to be for nothing. And that is so important. So how do we start to look at what direction we can take and figure out what we can change in our lives? Because that's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. We have shown that it definitely matters. Like your vote matters. You standing up and taking a stand and putting your vote and thinking for yourself, that matters. We have proven that. Now that we've proven that, how do we make you better? How do we make you stronger? How do we make you more resilient so that not only that trend continues, but also you have a better life. You have a more prosperous life. You have a more healthy life. You have a financially better off life. Because if you also, at the same time, start to become more physically fit, more mentally resilient, understand communication and how to deal with people and how to cooperate with people, if you understand some basic things and you become better at these things and you build these skills, then your life is better, then society becomes better. And as the culture continues to shift, then we continue to move toward this idea of liberty, which the United States was founded on. This idea of we the people of the United States, we the people, was founded on a strong people. And that starts with the individual. It starts with you and me. So before I babble on a little more, I'm going to take a quick drink from my American flag cup. This thing is awesome. You can go to iceshaker.com and get your own American flag cup. This one's actually an old school. So before the podcast was a Good Wolf Project, it was Good Wolf Radio. So if you're on YouTube, you can see that. I've got the old logo on there, Good Wolf Radio. And on the other side, I have inscribed, I don't know if you can see that, this is what hard feels like. That's actually a quote from Alex Hormozy. I enjoyed that quote a lot. Just to remind myself that when my mind wants to bitch and complain that, oh, this is hard, just to remind myself this is what it's supposed to feel like. It doesn't matter if it's a physical hardness or a mental hardness, but I think we find ourselves, again, in such a comfortable place, myself included. I mean, I live in society, so that's the way that it is. It's easy to convince ourselves that things are harder than what they are, that things are more challenging than what they actually are, because we don't have to work hard for a whole lot, because we don't have to work. I'm not saying we don't work hard. What I'm suggesting is because our society as a whole is in a place where, because we don't have to work hard, because we don't find ourselves in poverty, we don't find ourselves, in complete disaster. Most people are more worried about buying their next car than they are, finding their next meal. And because of that, we we misconstrue the idea of hard. That's why I have that on there. And that's why I think that it comes down to the individual. It comes down to us as society to be able to start to shift this culture. Now, one of my favorite quotes comes from a poem from Rudyard Kipling, The Law of the Jungle. And the quote is, the strength of the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. Now, that's an excerpt. There's much before it and then much after it. But essentially, in the poem, The Law of the Jungle, what Rudyard does is explain why a strong wolf is important for a strong pack and why it's important for that strong wolf to then be able to support the strong pack as well, in order for the pack to survive and the pack to be strong and the pack to continue to thrive and not be defeated. So I'm going to use that frame as to help us understand what we can do moving forward. So it is the strength of the wolf that makes the strength of the pack first, and then also the strength of the pack that makes the wolf strong at the same time. It starts first with the individual. It starts first with a strong person. In order to have a strong person, we need to be able to literally be physically and mentally strong. We need to have physical health, and we need to have mental resilience. I'm not going to say mental health because I fucking hate that term, because it is just a term that has been created to make us all believe that we are all mentally disabled and mentally idiotic and mentally falling apart, which is not true. The world is hard. Life is not fair. Shit's challenging. And that's the way that it is. We all have anxiety. We all have feelings that ebb and flow. We all have emotions that come and go. That is the human experience. That is the human condition. And we have been fooled as a society into thinking otherwise, that we're a fucked up mess. Not true. So what we need is to build more mental resilience and to understand the human condition and to understand that this is what being a human means. This is what it means. It means challenging and hard times. It means having anxiety. It means being stressed. It means having to overcome obstacles and questioning yourself. That's what it means. It's the human experience. That's what it is. So first, I believe it first starts with physical health, because when you focus on your physical health, it also at the same time builds your mental resilience. Those things go hand in hand. You can't start with physical or mental resilience and build physical health with mental resilience. Like, I'm gonna make myself mentally stronger. Okay, let's start meditating. Let's start building mental awareness. Start reading, personal development books or whatever. Start listening to different podcasts. Start doing these kinds of things. Start separating our emotions and our feelings. Great. That doesn't make you any physically stronger. But if we want our culture to shift, we need both of these things. So it starts with physical health. If this change in society is going to last, it starts by 70% of American society not being obese. That's what it starts with. It starts with that. We have been fooled in believing that that is normal, that that's usual. Like, human beings, they're supposed to be big and fat. Like, that's the way. No. If you look at videos from 1960s, go back to JFK's presidency, however short it was. If you look at those videos, what was he integrating? What was he putting into practice? He was putting a lot of physical education into practice in schools. And if you look at those videos, it is absolutely phenomenal and crazy, the amount of physical education that they put in and how athletic these people were, these kids were, the society was. It's crazy. And when you ingrain that and you build that into a person early on, it follows forward in their life. So no, it's not normal. Like, being unhealthy is not normal. Having to take medications is not normal. Medications are a very new idea. The pharmaceutical industry has only been around since like the 1940s. So it's very new. It's a very new idea. Human beings, they survived many years before, hundreds of thousands of years before the pharmaceutical industry showed up, and survived for long. I mean, once the biggest shift, there were two big shifts that happened when it came to human longevity. One of them, sanitation. Like once we figured out that we couldn't, especially doctors, like you can't go from this person to delivering a baby and not wash your hands. Doctors thought that was nuts. What do you mean I need to wash my hands if I go from this person to delivering a baby? My hands are just fine. Doctors thought that was nuts. Crazy, right? And yet we trust the medical establishment today. Nonetheless, that was one of the big shifts. And then penicillin was one of the big shifts, which, yes, that's essentially when the pharmaceutical companies launched, like the industry really launched, was when penicillin was found. But outside of that, there hasn't been a huge jump in human longevity. Like those have been the things. What has decreased substantially is the health span of human beings ever since the advent of pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry, and especially the expansion of big foods. The human health span has decreased substantially. So that's why it starts with physical health. It starts with your physical well-being. It starts with your physical prowess. That's what it starts with. If you begin there, then mental resilience comes along for the ride. Like you build mental resilience through it because, yeah, you got to overcome temptations. Yeah, you got to work hard. Yeah, you got to push yourself. Yes, all this shit happens. Like all that is very true. When you start there, what we've been fooled into thinking is that it's hard and that it should be easier. And that, well, we might as well just, we got all these other things. We got medicines and we got everything and we got the healthcare system, and we might as well just fall back on them instead of, us actually doing anything about it. That's what we've been fooled into thinking. And it is exactly that way of thinking and that foolery that has found us in this situation. It is exactly that way of thinking and exactly that propaganda that has found us where we are today. And we have allowed ourselves to slip into that, to abdicate responsibility to big pharma and to healthcare and to all these other industries and government and so on and so forth. We have allowed that to happen. And if we've allowed it to happen to now, up until now, we can then take that away. But it starts with taking back your physical health. Then, as you do that, you will build mental resilience, but you also have to build your mental resilience at the same time. You're going to be building mental resilience in the gym. You're going to be building mental resilience, changing your nutrition, becoming a different person. All of that's going to happen. You have to understand that there's going to be a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. It's going to be hard. You're going to want to go backwards. You're going to want to quit. You're going to want to give up. All of these things are going to happen, but that's part of the human condition, and all you have to do is keep going. That's literally all you have to do. That is all you have to do is just keep going. Don't let yourself fall into complacency. Don't let yourself be convinced that, I can just go and do whatever and I'll just let them pop me with pills. Don't let yourself be convinced of that. It's going to be hard. That's it. That's what it comes down to. But if you just keep going, you'll get to where you want to go. It's the damn truth. Anybody else who's telling you anything different is probably from the government. So push through, get yourself better, and then at the same time, start to build that mental resilience. That means understanding what's going on with your mind, understanding what's going on in your head, understanding and listening to what's happening in your brain, which is we have been conditioned to not do, because essentially we've been conditioned to look at everything else around us, to be distracted all the time, and to not pay attention to what's going on in our head. And many people cannot be away from their phone long enough that they get anxious being away from their phone, and they get anxious when they actually have thoughts going through their head. That's why they grab their phone, because they don't like listening to their mind. They can't deal with listening to their mind. So mental resilience and mental fortitude comes down to starting to listen to what's going on in your head. And when you start to listen, then you can start to pull things and parse things apart. You can start to pull apart feelings from actual thoughts, from reality, and so on and so forth. Instead of like giving into this feeling and this urge right now, you can go, okay, well, I kind of have this feeling right now, but is it something that I should actually do? Does it actually move me toward my goal? Does it actually make me better? And you can start to pull these things apart. And as you pull them apart, then you can see the gap between them. And then you can go, oh, well, it's just a quick feeling. And all feelings are fleeting, and they come and they go. And you listen and you pay attention for a second. And most of the time you realize, oh, it's just, all right, it's just something that happened. Well, look, that feeling came and the feeling's gone. Okay, sure enough. Now I can move on and I can continue to move toward my goal. And that's what it really comes down to. That's what mental resilience really comes down to, is being able to listen and pay attention to your head, overcome those temptations. Ask yourself, is this something that I really need? Is this something that I have to give into? Is this something that I have to do? Is this something that that has to, be a part of me? So that's where the work happens. And that work, honestly, is much harder than the physical work. The physical work, when it comes down to it, you just got to show up. Like, you just got to show up and do it. The mental work is definitely harder. Like, that's the hardest work that a human being will do. And that is definitely ongoing. And recognizing that this work that you're going to do is going to be ongoing work is important. And again, if we want culture to shift, if we want culture to move, understanding that is important. The growth of the human being is an ongoing thing. Physically, mentally, spiritually, all the above. The growth of the human being is ongoing. It is a daily process. It is something that you have to continuously do. You cannot give that to somebody else. You cannot hand it off to somebody else. You will not be better, because they will not look out for you. A human being's tendency is always to look out for number one. That's just the way that it is. That doesn't mean that we then also have to work with the pack or the community, which we're going to get to in a second, but that's the human being's tendency. So if you understand that, you should question giving up responsibility of your health to somebody else, especially to a system. Okay? Build your physical health, build your mental resilience, so that we have the strength of the wolf is the pack. We have strong individuals to have a strong society. Okay, so we start there. Then we move to the strength of the pack as a wolf. So once we have strong individuals, then we can have a strong society. But as a strong society, we have to understand how to fucking work together. And we have definitely gone backwards when it comes to being able to work together. So there's a couple things to think about when it comes to being able to cooperate with others, to being able to communicate with others. And that's what it really comes down to. Before I jump into that, I'm going to grab this wonderful American flag cup again. All right. Now, let's talk about the strength of the wolf is the pack. Let's talk about having a strong community and strong society. In order for that to happen, we've already dealt with the individual and how to build a strong individual. We all know what to do there. We all really know what to do. And we've given that up to other people, and now it's time to take that back. If we're going to sustain this change moving forward, that's just what has to happen. Now, the second part of that is there are a couple of truths when it comes to being a human being. Number one is that you have to be a strong human being. Like, you have to be a strong individual. You have to be strong, physically strong, mentally strong, and you have to be willing to endure obstacles and challenges and things like that if you want to get to where you want to go. Number two is you have to work with people along the way. You have to be able to work with people along the way. It is no doubt and unquestionable. You have to be able to do that. Many people animal people especially, like, Whenever I see bumper stickers about like, I'm a dog person because I can't deal with people, I go, okay, well then become a dog, like whatever. That's not on them, that's on you. That's your problem. And I'm not against animals by any stretch. Love animals. Huge fan of dogs, huge fan of cats. That's great. The point is, the issue is you. And it comes down to the person and the individual. If you know how to work with people, it actually is very enjoyable. It's really enjoyable, as a matter of fact. Being able to learn a person's history, know a little bit about where they came from, some of the wisdom that they have, some of the knowledge that they know, some of the things that they've done in their life. To be able to know that about somebody, you go, wow, that's real interesting. That sounds like something I'd want to do. So to be able to cooperate with people, not only do you get to know somebody, but you can also do things. You can build companies. You can build organizations. You can build organizations for profit. You can build organizations not for profit. You can get people together and go have a good time. All of these things are things you get to do with people. So that ability it's just skills and abilities you need to build. That's all that it is. Okay? It starts with understanding that there's always going to be a dynamic tension in society. There's always going to be disagreement in society. Each individual is their own person, which means each individual has their own lens, which means that each individual thinks differently from the other one. On average, if you look at the bell curve of society and break it in half, on average, there's going to be a big swath of people that kind of think one way, and then a big swath of people that kind of think another way. Now, there's a whole spectrum on within each one of those groups, but you can clump them together kind of in those groups. And we've seen that with the presidential election. That's just the way that it is, and that's the way that it will always be. It will always be. Human beings will always think differently. Always, forever. That's the way that it is. So you have to start by understanding that. Doesn't mean you have to agree with anybody. Doesn't mean you have to go along with what they say. As a matter of fact, one of my other favorite quotes comes from the movie Boondock Saints, which if you have not seen that movie, I strongly recommend that you do. It's toward the beginning of the movie, and a pastor is giving a sermon, and he says something to the effect that it is not the evils of bad men that we should fear most. It is the indifference of good men. So, yeah, damned if you should not speak up when you feel like you need to speak up. Like if someone's saying something irate and something that you agree with, you should say something. Like, no, that's not something that I agree with. You shouldn't be the, quote, silent majority. Like, you should say something. You don't have to be a dick about it, but you should say something. But that's where understanding how to work with people comes into play. Most people don't know how to have that conversation. One of them goes, no, this is what I think. The other one goes, no, you're stupid. And then the other person goes, well, they just call me stupid. That's the way that adults do it. So kids are actually a lot better than that. But being able to have that conversation and communicate with a person is important. Do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Most people just want to be right. But if we're going to continue to move into the direction that we have voted to go, then we need to learn to be effective. And to be effective, we need to understand that there's going to be a dynamic tension in society always. A dynamic tension between essentially two opposing ideas. A spectrum of two opposing ideas. And within that, then we need to learn how to understand each other within that. Again, understanding doesn't mean that I need to agree. You should fight for your idea as best you can. But the way that that's done is much different than what we think. We shoot to just be right. No, this is what I said. This is the way that it is. This is the way that it is. The problem is a man who's changed against his will is of the same opinion still. That's not right, but it's something to that effect. So we want to be able to talk with a person and get them to see things differently. That's all we want. Here's the way that I see things, and here's a different way to see them. Which really comes down to being able to first understand, and then you can start to be understood. Because in society today, again, everybody is more worried about being right than they are being effective. If you want to be effective, understand what the other person is saying. Oh yeah, is that right? Yep. Tell me more. So why do you think that? What's going on there? Well, that's interesting. Well, have you ever thought about it this way? Well, I wonder if you've thought about this instead. No? Well, here's a different way to think about it. And if you go about it a different way, then you can actually start to maybe move the needle in a different direction. Okay? Right now, society is just more worried about, it's like two rams just constantly knocking heads against each other, which is not very useful, especially when there's a group of people back in the corner going, ha ha ha, look at these idiots ramming, banging heads against each other. We're going to sit here and start manipulating them and changing them and moving society in the direction we want it to go, which is not what's going to be best for them. So learn how to communicate with people, learn how to cooperate, understand that people are going to have different opinions. And if you start with understanding first, then there's a better chance that that person will try to understand you. There's a better chance of that. One book, a basic book to start with is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's an easy place to start. Just understanding psychology in general is important. The book Influence by, I forget his name. That's another great place to go so that you can understand how you're influenced by people and how you can then influence people at the same time. Just understanding basic psychology is important to getting cooperation. You have to cooperate with people at times, and if you want people to cooperate with you in any way, shape, or form, you have to understand how to talk to them. That's simply what it comes down to. Okay? We want to do it by force, but that doesn't work. Doesn't work. So understand that. And if we start to do these things, we start to build physical health, we start to build mental resilience, we start to learn that really it comes down to cooperation, understanding the other human being. Doesn't mean you agree with them. If this is what you think, you should fight to the death about what you think, but you should also fight to the death for that person's right to also think the way that they want to think. But I'm going to go ahead and keep trying to nudge you in my direction, is the truth of the matter. And that's great. If we do these things, then we have strong individuals that leads to a strong society. The strength of the pack is a wolf, the strength of the wolf is a pack. If we do these things, then we can actually sustain this change that we want. We can't sit here and continue to go, they're going to do this now. They're going to finally change something. They're going to do X, Y, Z. Can't do that. That cannot happen over the next 4 years. It can't happen over your lifetime. It just can't happen. It has to start to shift to the individual taking responsibility for their life. And as that starts to happen, then you start to influence those around you, closest to you. And as that starts to happen, your little pack starts to influence the bigger pack. And that slightly bigger pack influences a bigger pack, and so on and so forth. And that's how a society goes from complacent and comfortable to strong and resilient. And that's what it's going to take if we're going to sustain this change. Okay? Make sure that you share this with anybody who is in that complacent mindset, who is in that comfortable mindset, who's sitting there going, finally, we got somebody in there that can do something. Go, oh, by the way, we also need to do something as well. Make sure you share this with that person. And until next time, get out there and grow. Here's to your 1% growth every day.